When you think of the Victorian era, what comes to mind? Is it steam engines, Queen Victoria herself, or maybe gentlemen in top hats and ladies in elaborate dresses? It's often painted as an age of progress, industry, and refined culture. But lurking just beneath that polished surface was a side of Victorian life that was anything but civilized: its justice system. This wasn't about fairness or second chances. It was a brutal, theatrical, and often terrifying machine designed to enforce order through fear. Let's pull back the curtain on the punishments that once shocked the world. The Victorians had a simple, and frankly, grim philosophy. To stop crime, you had to make an example of criminals. The goal wasn't to rehabilitate someone, but to use their suffering as a public lesson. And there was no bigger lesson than a public execution. Until 1868, hangings were spectator sports. Imagine this: thousands of people, from all walks of life, gathering in a town square. Vendors would weave through the crowds, selling food and drinks. Newspapers would print sensational stories about the condemned, turning them into macabre celebrities. Parents even brought their children, believing it would teach them a moral lesson. But instead of quiet contemplation, these events often turned into rowdy, carnival-like spectacles. It was a dark form of entertainment disguised as justice. But what if your crime wasn't serious enough for the gallows? Well, you might get a one-way ticket to the other side of the world. This punishment was called transportation, and it meant being exiled to a distant penal colony, most famously Australia. People were shipped off for crimes that seem minor today, like stealing a loaf of bread or a piece of cloth. The journey itself was a nightmare, a long and dangerous voyage packed into the hull of a ship. If you survived the trip, you'd face a life of grueling labor under a harsh sun, thousands of miles from home, likely never to see your family again. It was a sentence of social death, a way for society to literally cast its problems away. For those who remained in Britain, prison wasn't a place for quiet reflection. It was a factory of suffering. The Victorians perfected the art of hard labor, designing tasks that were physically exhausting and mentally crushing. One of the most infamous inventions was the treadmill. This wasn't the gym equipment we know today. It was a massive, relentless wheel that prisoners had to climb for hours on end, their collective effort used to power things like mills or pumps. Then there was the crank-a-handle in a box of sand that a prisoner had to turn thousands of times a day, for absolutely no reason. It was punishment for its own sake. Another common task was oakum picking, using your bare fingers to shred old, tar-soaked ropes into fibers. It was painful, mind-numbing work designed to break the spirit. And of course, there was direct physical punishment. Floggings and beatings were common, especially for younger offenders, but justice was far from blind. Your social class, your gender, and your age all played a massive role in your fate. A wealthy person caught shoplifting might get a simple fine and a slap on the wrist. A poor person who did the same could be thrown in jail or even transported. It was a system that reinforced the rigid social hierarchy of the time. Eventually, the public's stomach began to turn. Voices of change reformers, writers like Charles Dickens, and religious leaders started to speak out against the cruelty. They argued that this system wasn't creating a more moral society, it was just making it more brutal. This growing public outrage slowly, but surely led to major reforms. Public hangings were moved behind prison walls, the transportation system was abolished, and children were no longer imprisoned alongside hardened adult criminals. This was the beginning of a long, slow shift towards a more humane way of thinking about crime and punishment. The shadows of the Victorian prison still linger in our modern debates, reminding us of a time when justice was less about healing and more about horror. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the dark side of history. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories from the past. See you next time.